Welcome, everybody, to Latter Daily Digest, where we honor creators. This time, we're honoring Jessie Frankel, or Jessica Frankel, as you'll see her on Facebook. The reason we wanted her on the show is because I have dubbed her the Queen of Content. She is very diligent at posting content on a regular basis. I see sometimes 4, 5, 6 posts a day coming from you. And it's not just your fleeting thoughts. They're actually very valid things that you post that we can actually learn from. So we really appreciate you coming on the show. Now, those of you who've been watching know that we interviewed Jessie just a few days ago. We got up to a point where she was in Singapore, but we want to move on and hear what it was that made her finally leave the church. And so Jean and I will turn the time over to you, Jessie, and let us know what were you doing in Singapore and why is it that you moved away from Singapore?
In just 1 second, I wanted to say, since she's in Texas and she posts a lot, we could nickname her the Post Ma'am.
Yes.
Think about that.
I see what you did there.
Anyway, yeah, Jessie, welcome to the show, and let us know why you moved to Texas and what happens from there.
Yeah, why in the world, right? So our joke was kind of like from the what was it, to the middle, from the Middle East to the, no, now I'm confused. Anyway, we had a joke from the east to the west, right? Like east meaning Asia, Singapore, and then coming to Texas.
Maybe the Midwest. I don't know if Texas.
Here you go. I think that was it. I was just blanking right now. But anyway, so we moved to Singapore for my husband's job. And funny enough, we had some sort of offer before where they were asking us if we maybe consider Texas. But for a German Texas, and that's absolutely biased, I lived here now, it's not true. But we were thinking like cowboys, country, like hillbillies. Like we were like, maybe we skip that for now. And
you weren't thinking better beer?
Yeah. And so the offer next to Singapore, as I then described, and we had a great experience, met wonderful people in and outside of the church, to be honest. So in Singapore by itself, there obviously kids don't learn Asian or Mandarin is in Singapore that fast. So they go to, if you're an American, you go to the American school. If you German, like us, we went to the German international school, and then Swiss, Austrian, they would go to that same school. Then there was a big Australian school. So very multi-international people. So a fun and great experience. But it's also a very expensive place. Really, like the closest I would compare is Manhattan. Living with 3 kids in Manhattan gets pricey fast.
Wow.
Yes, it's very, very expensive. It's a fun place. Like traveling in Asia is really cheap because you're really close to all those cool countries, but not free. So we burned through our savings, had a great time, but it was kind of where we talked to the company. We're like, we need something cheaper. This is not, our third one was getting older, like preschool. So that's all private, and only our first 2 were covered because, like I said, the other one was an infant. And so then they came around, we're like, well, we're looking for somebody in San Antonio, Texas. And to be honest, I knew of Dallas and maybe Houston, but I'd never heard of San Antonio. I didn't even know, like as a German, I have no clue what the Alamo is. So that was kind of a funny experience.
It's a car rental place, right?
Yes, right. It's everywhere. And so,
and you have to know what it is in order to remember it.
Yes, but I don't think we have Alamo in Germany, maybe now, but back in the day, at least I don't remember it. So it didn't really said nothing to me. But we had a lot of Mormons in our expat ward that either lived once in Houston or had connections to Houston, but they were all like loving it. And so when we started like, hey, we have this offer, what do you guys think? They're all like, do it. You will love it. It's great. So to be honest and fair, that helped, right? That you knew a lot of people who loved the place you're going to. So that was really kind of, okay, we appreciate those people in general. And if they say, I mean, I couldn't imagine or wouldn't, why would they lie to us, right? So we're like, well, if they all say they really enjoyed it, I think we can give it a try. So we did. It's quite a travel from Singapore to San Antonio. It's a long, long flight, multiple connections with little kids. You can imagine, yay, fun, but at least just one trip. We made it, and as a lot of Mormon would claim, and I would say that is a thing, right? You move to places, you have a community. So we moved to Singapore, we had an immediate community, and a lot of German parents that I met through school, they were saying the same, like, how did you know already so many people? And I was like, well, I go to this church, right? And same in San Antonio, right? First Sunday, you go to your ward, you get to know people, and they're all like, where are you from? How can we help? So, I mean, that is a positive in Mormonism, I would definitely say, and I benefited from it for sure. And normally the bishop then wants to contact you. So all the same shebang was happening here too. I quickly got a calling in Young Women's, which I had in Singapore as well, Young Women's presidency or counselor. And so far so good, loved it, was a great experience. In Germany, another thing, which is not big, we don't do Boy Scouts. And then it became like a trademark issue for the church in Germany because they had no rights. So they had to close it all down like decades ago. Had nothing to do with the sexual abuse cases now.
Oh,
so
wow.
My brother didn't grow up doing Boy Scouts, and my husband neither. And our boys were, I guess, too little still in Germany. But it's still not a thing even in church. Like, you don't really do it. It's more like boys and girls activity, and then the same thing, kind of like mutual, right? And so that was kind of new to us here in Texas. Like, our boys started doing like Cub Scouts, I guess, as first, right? And then as the primary president, you charge over Cub Scouts is the younger ones. And then Boy Scouts, and then my husband was involved. It was never our thing, I have to be honest. It's just this kind of, and maybe that's maybe a little crass, but I would say it's this over-exaggerated, boys are outdoorsy, masculine kind of thing. And even though my boys were outdoorsy, there were no Boy Scout material. They could care less for like medallions and badges. They just like to do fire, and they like to camp. So it was always this like, and I even asked members now of Ward 2, like, I don't, and maybe that's really my German upbringing, I didn't understand why our church was so involved with Boy Scouts. Like, why are they not doing it in private? I mean, right? Like, lots of my neighbors that went to PACs, but has nothing to do with religion or church. So that was always, I would say, maybe irritating to me. Like, why are we so involved with this organization? And so that was one thing. And then I was the primary president, was in charge over Cub Scouts. And another thing that kind of irritated me too, I have to say, is I saw the budget I had as a primary president over Cub Scouts, and I'm just now rounding it up. I had $600 a year for Cub Scouts and $150 for the girls.
Well, that's not fair.
Yeah, exactly. Right. That always had wrong with me. So I was more than generous. Always, I told them, like, no, you spend money. If you want to go with the girls, something, do it. Just because there's no organization behind it backing it doesn't matter. So that was one thing I struggled with in young women and young men, kind of the same, right? The young men have all those, like, yeah, the young women have once a year they big camp, but that's about it. And not all boys like the outdoorsy either. So it's this, and again, maybe that's more the European German in me. It's this over-crass stereotypes about girls and boys and females and males that didn't sit right with me, because I was even like, even as a believing Mormon, I was still like, oh, but I know a ton of girls who like to camp. I know a ton of girls who are super good with like fire and stuff. And I know a ton of boys who could care less. Like, why is it so exclusive, right?
Did you ask anyone, Jessie? Did you ask anyone why the discrepancy?
I did. And mostly it was more like, well, it's the culture, it's the history, it's just what we do. Never a satisfying answer. And then I don't know if you guys remember, I don't remember the time, but I did remember when the church all of a sudden was like, we're done with Boy Scouts, right? And it came to me as a believing Mormon, being a primary president, out of the blue. And to be fair, I was kind of happy, but not because I knew why we ended it, but because I never liked it, right? So I was like,
do you know why we ended it? Do you know why the church ended it?
Well, I can tell you what they told me back then.
I'd be curious to know what they told you.
Yeah, so what they told me, because I was still though so surprised, because it was such a, I mean, at that point I think I accepted it as an American thing, right? That's just what the American LDS Church does. And I understood how deep the roots were, and for decades how long we were doing it. So I still was kind of like, I came out of the blue. So what they told us is officially that we had to step aside because the Boy Scouts of America organization was thinking about letting more homosexuals being leaders. And since they cannot forbid us then to do that because they're still the umbrella organization, then kind of, so to speak, we're screwed. So we need to step aside, right?
I think
And
that's
even,
exactly why they did it. They are, as we know, very homophobic in the church,
yes,
and heaven forbid they should let a, a, a homosexual individual help lead these Boy Scouts, because surely they'll lead them astray right
yeah,
down to hell,
like it's contagious, right?
Right, exactly.
The
Yeah.
second place excuse is that there's so many lawsuits around the Boy Scouts and the leaders SAing people. And so they said, we do that enough at church. We don't want to do it at camp out anymore.
Yeah. I just want to say, to me, that never, at that time, if I'm honest, didn't trickle down to me. That was the reason, was LGBTQ, right? So, but in that excuse, even as a believing Mormon, and in Germany, like, you know, same-sex marriage is a thing for decades. Even as a Mormon, it wasn't even a thing because nobody was even talking about politically, because it was just, that's what the world does, and it's okay because you don't need to be a Mormon and get more married, but you can do that and go to the civil town or townhouse, right? And you can do that. But that wasn't, I grew up like that. That was just normal. And that was another thing I always struggled with the church. But then you get those soft, right? We love them. And well, if they don't live like it, we don't have anything against them, which still is an oxymoron, kind of, if you ask me. But so that was then weird too, where I'm like, really? We cannot, like, and then the other thing that didn't make sense to me is still like, if we don't have homosexuals in our church, then why would that be an issue for us? The Boy Scouts never forced their leaders on us. It's always Mormons on Mormons anyways, right? So that was still like, there was a logical discrepancy for me where I'm like, yeah, but how is that our problem? I mean, if they want to do that and that's okay for them, it's still not our issue. So it felt iffy, but again, what do you do on the shelf, right? So I jump a little because I think in the years between there wasn't much that pops out to me. So so I was in the primary presidency for years, and then in 2000, I have to think now, I believe it was 18. Was it when already COVID has started?
2020.
19? 20?
The spring of 2020 is when we had the
Okay,
lockdown.
yeah, you're right. You're right. So it was then summer of 2020. Thank you. So summer of 2020, I had my oldest son went on a mission, Philadelphia, Spanish speaking, because back then we had a green card. And so green card holders cannot go outside of the country. And so the bishop made sure and said, well, we will write it down. But the funny thing to me was just like back then where I'm like, what? He's like, but the brethren will figure it out. Where I'm like, there's nothing to figure out. It's just a fact. He can. And we're not willing to risk our green card, or he, just to go overseas. Because obviously, right, like lots of relatives and family were like, wouldn't it be fun if he comes to Germany? We're all like, it's not going to happen because of our status. So that was kind of funny, where still people would say that. And I'm like, no, I know. And they're like, well, you don't. And I'm like, no, I do actually, because it's just a fact, right? That wasn't even something for a miracle can happen. It can't. It's just it. So that was a little funny side story. So my son goes on a mission, and in Philadelphia, so Texas, we were pretty, like, we could do a lot of stuff still. We could go outside. We weren't as crazy, I would say, with laws and everything. And as I think a lot of people can remember, the East Coast was way tighter, right? And Philadelphia too. So for him, that was a struggle right from the get-go. Like, they had to be in the mission apartment, and there were 3. I forgot what was the rule. I think it wasn't enough missionaries because of COVID, so they had to have 3s then. And so they were stuck in that apartment for 2 weeks. Like that's the beginning of his mission. And that's
Wow.
tough, right? I mean, for multiple reasons. I mean, you get bored out of your mind. I think my son was reading all Uchtdorf's talks, and even after 3 days, he's like, I'm kind of done. And you get tired of reading, right? Even if it's good material, but also you're really limited because you can only read church material, right? And then the other two missionaries, I think one was about to die, right? That's at the end of their mission. And they've been together through this thick of COVID. So they've been together for 6 months. So you have a duo that's together, and I'm pretty sure they had a hard time. And then you have this newbie coming up, right? So it's a threesome, so to speak, is always a little complicated as well. So it was more like two of them. And then my son knew kind of high expectations of his missions, following all the rules. And they were not even wearing their name tags when they went outside. And as a good Mormon, right, he told us. So back then, right, because of the COVID, you were allowed, and I think the rules have changed to once a week call, but during COVID, he was allowed twice a week. And I don't think he had a real time limit. So sometimes we talked for hours because he was just bored out of his mind. And
He could call you twice a week?
yes. FaceTime.
See, that's interesting because we were only allowed to call home
Twice
on
a year.
Christmas morning.
Yeah.
Christmas morning and Mother's Day.
Yeah,
Yes.
forget
And-
fathers on Father's Day. Who cares?
No.
Yeah,
There's so
and
many,
we were
so many
limited.
mails.
We were
Worshiping.
limited to, I think we had 10 minutes
Yeah.
to talk to our families, and that was it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, they've really gotten lax on that. But
And I
just
think
think
that they
two
figured out.
weeks, 2 weeks being sheltered and not being able to type the word Mormon in a Google search.
right? Win for Satan.
Yeah, for sure. Back then, everything, right? Win for Satan. So he could call twice a week. There was no, I don't think, I mean, he really tried to live by the rules. I don't think there was a time limit. I think the only thing was that theoretically, his companions should be able to hear him in another room. And officially, I think they were supposed to see the screen in case he's doing something naughty, right? But they could care less. They were happy that he was kind of occupied, right? And so we would talk for hours, and they even cracked their phones. So they were able to listen to R-rated movies, but also music. So my son recorded it because he was such a good Mormon, right? He's like, Mom, it's like F-bomb here and MF here. And I'm like, what? And I was really appalled because, like, you're not raised like that. You're like on a mission. Like, we were all just shocked. And then one day they even drove to a Starbucks, and my son is in the car and he's like, Mom, we're driving to Starbucks. We don't even have an appointment. What are we doing? And I'm like, well, is there any chance you can talk to your mission president maybe? But, you don't want to tattletale and whatever, right? But and then there was a little bullying where the senior companion was the one who was in charge, who just told like the apartment needs to be at 68. And my son was freezing his butt off. But he was like, I'm the senior companion. It's 68. Don't you dare touch it.
Wow.
How can you get the warm feeling in your bosom about the scriptures you're reading if it's only 68 degrees?
Right. You have to work really hard.
Yeah, but I'm having a real hard time feeling sorry for any missionary that had air conditioning and heating, because on my mission in the wintertime, we'd get up and
talk to the mom for hours.
Yeah.
and have dinner appointments all the time.
And you probably would say, hey, elders, you guys are breaking the rules. Wait a minute. You guys are breaking the rules.
Yes.
When, not to be too crass, but when we would go to the toilet and pee, steam would rise up from our pee because our apartment was literally freezing. We didn't have enough money to have heat. And if we had enough money, we could buy a gas canister and run the heater, with that. But we didn't have that. So,
no.
Now these missionaries, and I had 2 dinner appointments on my entire mission.
Yeah, he didn't honestly much either, because you have to remember it's Spanish speaking. So those members normally don't have a lot of money. So their budget was really slim in comparison to a missionary in Utah, right? Who can almost have to defend all the invitations. They didn't either. So that was one thing that was kind of hard on his mission as well. And we actually went back after his mission, kind of like just he can show us where he's been. I mean, he has been in some apartments. It was disgusting. And like heroin needles on the sidewalk, like ghetto, where I'm like, what is this church doing with all the money? And I had no clue at that time how much money that church had, right? But still, I knew how much we paid on top of our tithing. Exactly. And you cannot even put my son in a decent, I'm not saying luxury, but in a decent area, right, where he's safe. Like he told me he had a dream where he dreamt like he was back into Boy Scouts, and he was like, and the fire was so real. So he told his companion that story, and he was like, yeah, dude, the fire, the house across the street burned down. I'm pretty sure your dream, and put the smoke in it and made a nice Boy Scout dream out of it. And he had a picture, he showed us pictures, like the whole house was like black and just burned down. Nobody lived in it, so nobody cared, right? But so that was the first kind of struggle. And then also in those first 2 weeks, he started to develop chills, couldn't taste anything, major headaches. And we send him a thermometer, we send him like blankets so he can check and I was like, but can you not call the mission nurse and tell her? I'm like, first of all, I think that's pretty COVID, and you have 2 companions. They might not want to get it. So you guys need to figure out your situation. And so he called the mission nurse, and lo and behold, via phone, she could just say, it's not, just on the phone. No, that's not COVID. That was it. End of discussion. And we were just dumbfounded. I'm like, what? They would risk the other. I was just thinking, if I'm the mom of those other kids, I would be pissed. Like, so how dare you?
You're at this point in your life, you're probably starting to get upset that the church wasn't taking good care of the missionaries with all of the funds, all of the money they have. And my gosh, the tithing pouring in. You're upset about how your son is being taken care of. Did he complete his mission the full 2 years?
I'll come to that, kind of. I mean, I can't get a spoiler. He did 23 months.
Okay. Well, that's close enough. Yeah.
Yes, close enough. So then, and then there were odd little stories he told us, like, so maybe I back a little bit. So my son is on a mission. Those weird things happen, right? Or more like frustrating things, I would say. Nothing would really like shake my testimony, right? It was just frustrating. And then, so 2020 in the summer, the stake approached me and asked me if I want to be the stake seminary teacher. So at least where I live, this is an unpaid job. We have over 100 kids in the stake, and I was in charge over the juniors. And back then it was all via Zoom, and it was already this like 2 deep leadership. So it was always 2 teachers for every class. So I did the Zoom seminary for a year. And that was, I would say, if I'm honest, the first time, even though I did seminary, but as a teenager, you just, filled in the gaps and did your papers. But I think it's different than teaching seminary. And so I would say for the first time for me in my life, I really had to kind of more in depth have to teach the scripture, because if you think about it, like primary and even young women's, I would say it's more like flowers, rainbows, and unicorns, like we do good, we want to be good. Like, for the young women's, it's like go to the temple, find a guy. For the kids, it's more like don't hit your brothers, right? Or sisters, and you don't lie, and we're gonna be kind to our neighbors, right? It's not depth. I'm not saying it's bad, but there's not much depth to it, right? It's kind of like, cotton candy, soft landing doctrine. And
that's
so
funny. For the adults, it's pay your tithing and go to church and go to the temple.
Yeah, that's then the addition to that, right?
That's the adult lessons.
True. But so for me, at least for the first time, I had to teach. At least for me, it was daunting because also the audience is different, right? Primary kids don't question you. They're just like, yeah, can I tell you? And cute stories. And young women's, it was fun too. And it's more like having good conversations. But with seminary, at least I expected, and especially with that generation having Google and everything, right? Like they will have questions. So I need to be prepared. So when I prepared my lessons, I was always thinking, what questions would I have? And maybe what would I've Googled and find, right? So kind of to be really, really prepared. And so then coming back to my son, so he's on a mission, learning things, telling me things. I'm like, yeah, I've learned this and this kind of tough with juniors. And so it was like this interesting dynamic of, if you will, in a positive way, we exchanged for the first time, maybe two, like really deep doctrine as mom and son, right? Like you don't do much. I mean, you do family home evening, we did too, and we read scriptures, but I mean, let's be honest, most of the time it's more like, let's get it over with attitude. Check the list, right? And then another thing happened for my son. In between. So there was, when they have, it's not exchange. What do they call it when you change your companions? Do you guys remember?
Transfer.
Yes. So he had a transfer with another two. So it's always three. So then he went to the other two and vice versa. And he's like, oh, those two were like jokesters. I thought I had it bad. Like, I'm like, what do you mean with jokesters? He's like, they're always playing pranks the whole day. I'm like, give me an example. He's like, just for example, I went to the bathroom. Their bathroom door was broken. So you kind of had to lock it from the outside. And he's like, and they thought it was funny to lock me in, right? And he's like, I mean, yeah, okay, funny, haha, for a minute or two. And he's like, I was in there for 15 minutes until they finally opened the door. And sure, you can say that's not super harassing, but it's still kind of like, they're missionaries. Shouldn't they all be good kids? And I mean, yeah, you can do some tricks here and there, but I was like, wow. I'm like, how does that kid is feeling about it who's constantly with those two jokesters, right? And he's like, yeah, I talked to him and he's like, I can't take it anymore. Like, this is a lot, especially if you're alone, right? Again, this three combination is not a good setup. And so I had it in my mind, and a couple of weeks later, I asked my son, I'm like, hey, have you heard anything of this kid? How is he doing? Because I just felt really bad. This was just one day for my son. And this kid, that's what he lives through, right? And he's like, oh, yeah, funny story. His parents, so they lived in DC. So you can drive up to Philly, right? It's a 4-hour drive or something. So he's like, no, they drove up, picked him up. They were like, we're done with the mission. I'm like, oh,
wow.
Okay.
Just, that was it, huh?
That was it, right? And then another kid where I don't know why the other missionary called him. Oh, I think his companion was the district leader. And my son answered the call, and the kid was like, my companion is gone. And he's like, what do you mean your companion is gone? He's like, he's gone. We went to bed and it's 7 a.m. He's gone. And they're like, okay, well, check outside if the car is still there. And he looked outside and he's like, nope, the car is not there either. So making the story short, they found the car at the airport. He had a credit card. He got a ticket and he just flew home.
Wow.
The kid was just like, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm fed up with this. And I'm like, wow, that's the second kid. So, and my son could feel that too, that there were a lot of kids who didn't want to be there. They were there to please their parents, peer pressure. That's the thing to do. But I'm like, that's not what I thought. And I was never on a mission, right? So I had more of those ideals about missions. And I was like, this is kind of like odd stuff. And then my son broke his pinky on a P day, nobody's fault, it just happened, playing football. And again, we're like, can you please go to the missioners and say you need an x-ray? Because as I said, it was FaceTime, so we could see it. So his finger was like really oddly bent. So, I mean, I have no medical degree. And I was like, I'm pretty sure this is a broken finger. Again, he called the missioners, and via phone, the nurse was like, I doubt it's broken. And I was livid.
What is with that nurse? What? Oh my gosh.
You wonder if she is a nurse, you know what I mean? Or is she just a mom?
It's like she had a rock and a hat and could remote view the x-ray.
And so I went to somebody in our ward because then it's more legit, right? If you talk to a Mormon doctor. And so I talked to him and he's like, I mean, obviously I can let's say something from so far, but and I had a picture and he's like, but it looks like it's broken. He's like, I mean, either way, he said, any person with a medical degree have to say you have to have an x-ray to at least say it's not broken, right? I mean, he's like, there's no way of knowing that. So kind of to give my son a little more authority. I was like, tell them we have a doctor in our ward and he said that you need to have an x-ray. But as you can imagine, this like days in the making. So it's already like a week. He already baptized somebody with a broken finger. But so he talks to the nurse and she's kind of finally kind of like, well, I guess go to the doctor and we will arrange an x-ray. And I was like, did she at least apologize? No. And so the doctor then said, this is really bad because it already started growing weirdly together. So you need to see a specialist. And so he told the nurse, I was like, well, did she at least apologize? Kind of saying like, wow, sorry, I got that wrong, right? And at least I expected that. And he's like, no, the nurse said, well, that's just the thing. Sometimes you see a break way better when time has passed. What is she smoking?
Oh my gosh.
Just admit it. You made a mistake. Apologize. But apparently it's sometimes not a Mormon strength.
We got to get that nurse on and do a show.
Yes.
Right.
That's creative nursing in Mormonism.
Very
Be
creative.
the name of the show.
So then a little bit of at least a fun thing for my son. So he was then transferred to the Philadelphia Eagles sports complex. So there were tons of NFL players, which he thought was really cool, right? And I get that. So then he sees the specialist, right? So a person who works with like high paid, athletes. And he was mad. He was like, when did this happen? Why are you here now? And my son was so embarrassed, right, to say, I'm a missionary and my church told me not to go. So he made up some story and he was just mad. So it was so bad that he said, you need surgery in the next 36 hours or I'm not willing to do it. Because then it's so bad, I have to break the bone again. Then you can go home and do it there, but I'm not doing it. So then all of a sudden we get a call, I believe from our stake president, that he needs a surgery and they need both of our kind of, that we're saying it's okay, where I'm like, why would I not? But okay, I mean, I guess. And they needed the okay from the bishop, from the stake president, and they're still waiting for Salt Lake. I'm like, why do you need to wait for Salt Lake? So worst case, my son needs to even come home because you cannot manage in time because that doctor had a deadline because you can't reach Salt Lake. I didn't even know what it has Salt Lake to do with that. I mean, you guys have insurance, right? I mean, what do you do if somebody has an accident, right? Then it got even worse. So then they finally got the okay. And then the mission president was kind of really slightly sneaky kind of, do you guys have health insurance? And my husband is like, why does it matter? He's like, well, I mean, I'm pretty sure this will reach the deductible. So if you have health insurance, you can use it. And my husband's just like, well, why would I? Like, it's happened on a mission and the missionary is insured through the church. He's like, I'm not talking to my insurance company. It was just this weird weaselly where I'm like, how dare you even ask?
Those cheap bastards.
Yes, exactly.
My faith is starting to get shaken.
Yeah, right? So then he has the surgery on his mission. Then they have this whole debacle, what to do with his companion while he has the surgery, because then he would sit by himself for an hour and a half. So then other missionaries had to pick up his companion, come back in time, where I'm like, he had a real surgery, it was druzy. And then they were like, well, do we do street contacting? I guess not. I mean, I guess you need to kind of relax, but we'll make some calls. Where I'm like, oh my God. As if anyone would die if for a day you don't do missionary work, right? Because you're so successful anyways. So that was another thing where I was like already almost like, should we take him home? Should we bring him home? Like I'm not, because I was at a point where I'm more like, I don't trust anyone anymore. They're not looking out for my son, And so then at the same time, we're already like, I'm in my second year of seminary, we're back in person. And I'm starting to read. So we had to teach DNC, Doctrine and Covenants. And to be real clear, transparent, honest here, I don't think I've ever read it front to page because it's so boring. It never really enticed me. It was always confusing, kind of like just the history. So I had to teach this now. At the same time, so there's a lot of balls now in the hand. I have my son who's on his mission and is telling me things too about, like, he was struggling more with the race ban, because he was teaching mostly Puerto Ricans, so people of color, right? And so a lot of them had some nuggets, right? Where they're like, well, weren't your church racist? And my son's like, no. And then mom, and I'm like, yeah, I'm kind of learning things here too. I didn't know. So we both were kind of learning this new things. And kind of third element is like, so my marriage was struggling for years, and not in a like my husband and me couldn't stand each other or any major issues. It was more like the tools we got from the church weren't the best, which we didn't even consider. Like for my husband, it was like, we pray together, we read together scripture, we go through the temple, perfect marriage. Well, that's not how it works. And so we just slowly, which I now learned from a lot of other LDS couples, like seems to be a common issue, that's not the best tools to have a good marriage. And I'm not saying all LDS marriages are bad, not at all. They're great ones. I know great ones, but I feel sometimes we're deaf that there's a lot of bad stuff too. And so I don't know if you guys heard of her, Dr. Jennifer Finlayson-Fife. She's a Mormon or LDS sex therapist. She's really great in what she does. And so for us as a couple, all of a sudden, we learned from an LDS person who's open and strong about saying, yeah, not everything we learn at church is actually really helpful. And I think to this point, at least my husband, he's more conservative than me. It was more like the church can teach wrong, right? Like maybe mistakes here or there, but in general, everything they teach is of value and is good and wholesome and healthy. And here all of a sudden that's her profession, right? That's what she studied and she did it for decades. And she allowed us to admit, or at least kind of say out loud, not everything in the church is good. And it's not like I said before, it's not like I was never able and totally naive, but more like the people did wrong, right? And so now all of a sudden it's like, oh, teachings are not good either, not all, right? And so she really helped us, and we went into other therapy because we never did therapy in person, but she kind of helped force us, right?
Jessie?
Helped us a ton. So at the same time, so
Jessie?
yeah, sorry.
It's like if there are some teachings that aren't right, which ones are they?
Exactly.
I better check them all.
Yeah.
Because some of them aren't exactly right.
Exactly.
We should know. So
and now I would even flip it and say, and just because there are good ones, it's like throwing spaghetti to the wall. Some will stick. Sure, nobody's claiming the church has only bad teachings, right? It's like, sure, once in a while they hit it right. Doesn't make it true either, right? So
Randy has a clock that's right twice a day.
Here you go.
That's right. Yeah, I have to look at it at just the right time for it to be accurate.
Perfect.
Yes, that is such a good example, though. It is, right? You wouldn't buy a clock who does that, right?
That actually sounds like a good title for Tuesdays with Tim, throwing spaghetti at the wall. How some of the teachings of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints are actually true.
Yep.
They might stick, they might not.
Exactly.
They might not.
If it's 6:45, then my clock is right.
So my son left on his mission, and my marriage was not, let's say, particularly good. It wasn't bad, but it was just like we were just both bored with it. It wasn't romantic. We were working great as parents and doing business, so to speak, but it wasn't romantic anymore. So then a year later,
my marriage got instantly better when my child left the house.
Yeah, well, we still had 3 left. We were
so you were more like roommates.
Yes.
When you were husband. Yeah, that happened to my first marriage, actually.
And emotionally connected. And
exactly. And I think we all, especially in Mormonism, just because you sit there on Sunday and look like the perfect family, right? Then we just assume everything is well in Zion, right? And I think that's another issue with Mormonism. We don't like to talk about we're all still human and we all still struggle in all places, right? Anyway, so my son going to mission, our marriage was not so great, but we started slowly with therapy and stuff. And then it really, like, hearing that therapist, like, really broke things open in a good way. Like, first you have to bleed, get all the yuckiness out, right? And then heal properly. And we really got to a really good place in our marriage. And my son could see that all of a sudden, right? Like even our kids, all of them are like, I mean, funny enough, when we were really good, for the first time we went on vacation together, because we only went on family vacation. And funny enough, it was just a concert or some show in Vegas. So our kids were like, well, you went to Vegas and you came back and now you're all over. Like, what happened in Vegas? Nothing happened in Vegas. But it was
Stays in Vegas.
Right. What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas.
Exactly.
But whatever it is, you
Yeah.
set a pattern. Your children are going to want to go to Vegas because of that.
Yeah.
So yeah, and on top of all those things, you're teaching seminary, you're
Yes.
teaching church history,
Yes.
and you want to teach as good as you possibly can. So you want to research and be the best seminary teacher ever, I bet.
Yes.
And how does that work?
And the fourth element, so in our ward, and I think it's kind of common in Mormonism, we had a Relief Society book club. It wasn't officially from the church. It was theoretically you could invite your neighbor and blah, blah. We weren't even reading church material, really just romance novel. And sometimes there was a biography, like just good books. And since I was a seminary teacher, so it's those kind of four elements, I and Jennifer Finlayson 5 had a podcast with Carol Pearson, right? The LDS kind of like, she wrote things for the Ensign. It's kind of a known person in Mormonism, I would say. So she had a conversation with Jennifer, or a podcast, whatever you want to call it, right? It was really fascinating about polygamy and how polygamy cannot be healthy for relationships for men and women. So again, here's a person from Mormonism, at least for me, right? She's active and so to speak, safe to listen to. And I have this person who comes with a therapist background, both of them saying, this is not good. And I am confused, right? Because I knew I didn't like it, but I learned you have to be okay with it as a Mormon, right? Somehow you have to make it okay. So you just don't think about it. But here are those two women, and then there were two men, and honestly, I don't remember who they were, but they were Mormons talking how and why this is not healthy. So then I start Googling Carol Pearson, and I come across the book Ghost of Eternal Polygamy, right? If I have the title correct.
That's exactly right.
So people can look it up, buy it. It's great. So I buy this book because I loved her. I loved her, how she expressed herself. And she was still talking fondly about Mormonism and what she liked, but she thinks this is a bad thing. And so I got the book, I read the book. And for the first time, I read really honestly to God. I read all the nasty thing about how apparently polygamy can get rid of prostitution, right? All those weird quotes from apostles and leaders of the church, and how those teenage girls
got
that married.
Real Mormon history.
Exactly. But in a book from a Mormon, right? I haven't touched anti-Mormon literature, whatever that means now, right? Nothing. I've touched anything. I haven't, really watched any podcast or nothing. I just read this book because it feels safe. This woman has a good voice. I trust this therapist, and I read this book, and I'm screenshotting and sending texts to my husband. I'm like, what in the hell is this? For Germans, actually, Mormons say hell. I don't know why it's in English such a big deal. My kids always like, Mom! I'm like, it's just a location. Why can't we say that? So anyways.
Like kids say Philadelphia.
Exactly, right? So I send those things.
Philadelphia is this?
Yeah. So I think like screenshot of this book, right? Like the really bad stuff. Helen Mark Kimball, Fanny Elger, never heard of her in my life. And I'm born in this church, never heard of that name. And I'm appalled. Like, she lives in this house, she's a teenager, and all of a sudden he marries her, but it's not even officially polygamy time yet in Mormonism. Like, and my husband's like, where are you reading all this? I'm like, it's this book from Carol Pearson. And he's like, are there any footnotes? I'm like, plenty. Right. So he's looking into the footnotes, and I'm not sure if he starts then. He definitely read, what's the Mormon history books from the church? Do you remember those? Like, they have different...
The Saints series?
Yes. So he reads Saints, And that already kind of shaked him, where he's like, how do we come back from this? Because still people are like, at least Mormons from the 80s and 90s, saints is already tricky. Like there's stuff where you're like, huh?
Yeah, so I'll let you know that my wife in around COVID, at the beginning of COVID, wanted me to, and a little bit before, wanted me to read Saints because maybe that would bring me back.
Oh, wow.
Allow. And I said, wow, Saints is pretty good.
Yes,
Church is coming clean with about 30% more of history.
Exactly.
What? What do you mean by that? I go, yeah, they're saying stuff in this book that we never were taught. But it's still not everything.
So here's the funny twist. So my husband reads Saints and is kind of like, but he doesn't tell me. He told me later. He's like, he was in his head like, how do I make this all work? This is sick. This is just sick. But I'm getting comforted in a way by Carol Pearson's book. I'm shocked. And I'm talking to my Mormon friends and they're shocked too. And they're like, Jessie, where do we go from here? But if you remember, the end of her book is saying, we just have to speak up, right? We have to tell the brethren, they have to stop this. This is not a doctrine. This was wrong. This is bad. And I am an activist, right? So I'm like, okay, I have a solution. So that's why my husband then stopped talking to me about this, because he's like, well, you found a solution that didn't want to crush us. So I was just, okay, I guess we go with this now. So I'm like, oh, yikes. So I read the book, coming back to the book club. So I'm talking to all the women. I'm really close with them, know them well. And I'm like, I have here a book. And if you are feeling uncomfortable with it, let's not do it. But would you be okay if we read this in book club? Like, I need to talk about this. Like, I'm baffled. It is from Carol Pearson. You can look it up. And they're all like, no, no, no. I'm always like wondering. I never read anything about like safe material about polygamy. Let's read this book. And then somebody was like, well, but there is this church really book. Let's talk about polygamy. I don't know if you guys know those books. Let's talk about it, right? The priesthood ban, polygamy. So I made the deal. I was like, since I already read Carol Pearson's book, I will read the Let's Talk About Polygamy. To be absolutely fair to the church, right? We read all the books. That was even worse because she begins literally, the first page on that book said, at some point in world history, 80% lived in polygamous relationships. I'm like, where is the footnote to this? So I Googled it. If there ever in history was a time where 80% of humans, no, not even close. And there was no footnote, where I'm like, that to me was like, I cannot take this book serious, because Carol Pearson had all her footnotes. With everything that was tough, she had footnotes. This is a really strong statement. You need to back this. If you cannot back this, you cannot make a statement like that.
You're just making it up if you can't back it up.
Exactly. So I was, to be fair, hesitant, but I was like, I made a deal. I read the book, but she came up with all the same things that would shake me, where I'm like, and still all she had was always like, but Joseph was a good guy. We have to give him the benefit. But I'm like, well, then I have to give any Muslim prophet benefits. Then I have to give every church leader benefits. That was almost like as reading Fair Mormon, it's more frustrating than helpful, the answers, because they're so bad. I really don't understand how any intellectual, and I'm not even saying I'm super intellectual, but if you have some logic in your brain left, it got frustrating to me fast. Fair was so unhelpful.
You're saying it's perfect for the Deseret book to publish it, which is
yes, pretty much.
Doesn't have footnotes, lousy arguments.
Yes.
Perfect for apologists.
Yeah, if you want to stay in your bubble, right? If you want to be Truman and never leave, then sure. So we read the books, and it was interesting because even the Relief Society president back then was part of the group, and we were all like shaken and, well, it is disturbing, but the church is true, right? So it was an interesting book club. And I had one friend in that book club, really a dear friend of mine. Her husband is inactive since 20 years. I never knew why. That was the kind of, always was like, well, he never really, it's a long time. He just, I don't think, believed. But nobody really talks in church, right? Why spouses really leave. It's just like, yeah, they're not as strong, right? And so that
Yeah.
woman came up to me and she's like, do you know that's why my husband left? And I'm like, what? Polygamy. I'm like, oh. He's like, that's why he left. He served a mission and everything, got sealed in the temple. That's why he left. I'm like, oh, wow. Okay. So that was something to think. And again, then I've still seminary every morning. So in Texas, I go to the stake center every morning at 5:45 a.m. Then it starts at 6 and it goes almost an hour. And then the kids can go home a little bit and then they go to school. And so I do that every morning still. And I feel like, I have the book club. My marriage is getting better by admitting our tools that we got from the church is not good. Temple is not helping us, but this is helping us like greatly, like almost, for years we suffered and we didn't know how to fix this. And all of a sudden in months, so to speak, we get tools that work way better. It doesn't fix everything right away, right? But you can tell this is getting better, right? But it's not the temple going. It's not the praying. It's not the fasting. It's not the scripture. None of this helped. So I'm like, okay, this is great. And I think, honestly, that was our saving grace, why we got out as a couple, because we deconstructed, so to speak, our marriage first. And we allowed ourselves to say there are things that were not beneficial to our marriage. Then we also see the weird things in my son's mission. And we're like, ooh, what do we do? And then I think it's Christmas. And my other friend is still kind of talking with me and I'm sharing. And she's like, all you share is what my husband is struggling with. I'm like, okay. And I don't know how.
Jessie, is this the Christmas after the first year of COVID, or is this Christmas of 2021?
Christmas of 20. So 20. And so I come across the second endowment. Don't ask me how, but it's those things.
Yep.
Second anointing, yeah.
And what does it say in my manual? Do not discuss. I'm like, what do I tell my kids in seminary? They will definitely ask me, like, how is this helpful? Like, this is really bad.
Yeah, why not discuss it? That's my question.
Yeah, or don't mention it. Then erase it from church, right? Then it's not a thing. It's either a thing that we need to talk about it or not. Then say it's not a thing, right?
They could do that. They could say church history. Do not discuss.
Exactly. Yeah, pretty much. Blank statement.
Class over. Closing prayer.
Yeah. So it's New Year's. We're having a party with a couple of Mormon couples or families, and I asked them. I'm like, have you heard of the second endowment or anointment? And they're like, I mean, it's really this echo in Mormonism, right? People heard of it, but nobody knows anything about it. And then the one friend even Googled, and she's like, well, it says we should not speculate. And I'm like, yeah, I got that much. Thank you very much. I'm like, but still, what is it really? I'm like, how bad can it be? And so they're all, I could say, raffled, but then they all have more the attitude of dropping it. But I was already in the mood. Like I said, I read the book from Carol Pearson. I'm teaching D&C. And my son is saying, like, he's struggling with justifying race and the priesthood. And I'm just like, I was really like, I mean, I think nowadays people say to go down the rabbit hole. I felt more like I was a train and I could not brake. And it's too much weight, right? Until the train really breaks, you are overrun everything. So I was just in this heavy train running. I'm like, I can't stop. I need to know. So of course I Googled and I tried looking up on the church website and BYU, whatever, and still nothing. And of course I come across, what's his name? Tom Phillips, right? And I only read it, right? Like he has, I think it's on his side or somewhere else, but it just has the paper, what he experienced. And I am so devastated. I don't know why this hit me as hard as polygamy and race, because it's this unfairness. There is an elite group in Mormonism that gets special treatment, and you don't even know how to get it because it's so secret. This unfairness of it was painful. Like really, I don't know how to. I was like, what? There is such
And for the listeners who aren't aware, the second anointing is a secret ordinance that certain people are called to receive that excludes them from or excuses them from any sin, save murder, that they might commit. They're still guaranteed a spot into the highest degree of the celestial kingdom.
Yeah.
And looking back in history, it's typically the more wealthy people that would receive this second anointing, or those who are socially statused higher.
Yeah.
They're the ones that would get the second anointing, that God has said, okay, you're good to go. You can do whatever you want now. You're still guaranteed a spot in heaven.
Yes.
So go ahead. I just wanted to make sure that people understood what that was.
And
That's
if
right.
they can
And
do research and Google it or go on my site, I did a ton of that too. Learn it.
Yeah.
Don't trust
And
us,
also-
learn it.
also on Mormon Stories, Hans Mattson talks about it.
Love it. Love his book too. I send that book
Yeah.
because that's in different languages, kind of like the CES letter, right? I sent it to my dad in German. You can buy it on Amazon. It's a really thin book too. Well, really well written, and you all make your own, judgment about the book. So I come across this second anointment, and at this point, I have to say I didn't care anymore in a way where the information came from, because every time I tried with the church, it was dissatisfying because I only got so little. And also you never told me about Fanny Alger. You never told me about the teenage girls. I grew up with the widows, right? And too many women in church. That was about it. And so you have this mixed feeling of, I already cannot really trust you because you do know well aware those topics are icky at best. So you hide them from me. And then
they tell you what they tell you in the book, do not discuss. And then what does somebody else say? Or no, don't speculate about this.
Yes, right.
Well, then tell us, and we won't speculate. We'll know exactly what it is.
Exactly.
That's the
And
chunk. So that's what you want to be an advocate for.
Yes. And in a way, I would say in that January, a lot of things just exploded. Like all of a sudden I hear of Sam Young and saving children in our church. And again, to this point, I was so naive. I thought this is a rare thing that abuse happens in our church. It's some bad apples. Then the Boy Scout explode, right? Like, wow, we're in it deeply as a church with the numbers of abuse. And I cannot tell you how often I read things, then I signed up for Salt Lake Tribune because I feel like nowhere else in the newspapers are willing, and I understand it. We're a small group, right? But the Salt Lake Tribune is the one. So I signed up for this, and then I get those articles and I read even more. And like, I think every day I was like it was tears of madness. It wasn't really sad anymore. I was just pissed at this point where I'm like,
the floodgates are opening right at this point.
Yes,
and
exactly.
the water's starting to break through the dam.
Exactly. And I think you get to a point where you almost like, screw this. Like, I will look now everywhere I can. You don't tell me anymore, because actually, you know what? I'm an adult. I can decide for myself if this information makes sense or not. And it doesn't matter where it comes from. And if it's an obvious lie, I will be able to figure it out. That's what we do in politics and business. Like, you know what I mean? I mean, you said it before, like you like buying stuff on Amazon. Me too. What do? We read the reviews. Do I take them 100%? No, I take and cipher them out, right? Where I'm like, yeah, I mean, that negative wouldn't be a negative for me. But if there are 10 people saying it broke in the 10 first days, then I'm like, not buying it, right? Because we use our logic and then make our decisions. And I'm an adult. I should be allowed to then come to whatever conclusion.
And this is why your content is so valuable, because you don't just go by what people say. You're doing the research, you're finding it and printing, and you're putting it down there.
Exactly. And that's what I still do is when I post something, I still try to get into the mode when I was a Mormon, what would help me to at least like, I never heard this. Maybe I should read this, So I never try to be offensive. I never try to be like, oh, Mormons are so dumb. There are funny contents out there and I laugh, but I really hardly ever forward it just because I still have family and friends that I hope to reach, and I don't think that's the way to reach them, to offend them or make funny. If once you over this, I can laugh now, right? But I know if, like a really good friend or a brother or sister would read it, I'm like, I know they would just be like, oh, great, you're just making fun of us. So I'm like, it's not helpful. It might be helpful in deconstruction to have some humor, at least for me, then it was funny sometimes. But this is still what I do, is how I always leave it open, right? I never come to result, church was wrong, church was lying. I'm just like, I either end with, it looks like a lie, what do you think, kind of? Keep it open, right? And then you make the decision. I'm always post where I have this from. And then you read the whole thing and figure out for yourself if you come to the same conclusion. If you think it's all bullshit, sure. I cannot make anyone believe what I believed as a Mormon or as a now not Mormon, right? But
so you're finding the lies, the untruths, the things that the church doesn't want their members to know about. Was there anything in particular that made the dam break all the way open, or was it just wearing away little by little until you realized, hey, this is bullshit?
It's the wearing and tearing, I have to say. And I think the biggest one, but that's more the result of the information, is this disappointment. And I would even say not so much that I was lied to. Yes, that was hard, but there were always excuses for that, right? But more what hurt, and that's, I think, why the second anointment was for me maybe so painful, is this: it's not that righteous organization, that loving organization that I made it to be. Because I was taught they can, so to speak, only do good. Yes, we make mistakes, but we're talking crimes. A crime is not a mistake. So that was the other thing where I'm like, they're just blurring everything. A mistake, if for example, the prophets make mistake. Yeah, if he picked the wrong dish, if he picked the wrong tie, he made maybe a fashionable mistake. If you sleep with a teenager, that's a crime. It doesn't matter what time. Right? And that was what hurt so much, that I'm like, I defended an organization. You made me defend an organization that does disgusting, awful things. And you make me then tell people, no, we only do good. And then for me as a woman, worst is also waking up to, like, I supported patriarchy. Because I was the same woman as every Mormon woman. Like, I don't want to be bishop. I'm so glad I'm not bishop. That's not what it is about. It's about sitting at the table, being decision makers, right? And sure, maybe some women don't want this. But guess what? Some men don't want it either. So, but still, why they have all the opportunities, we don't. So there were all those things where I'm like, you used me. You made me a fool. That doesn't sit good. I don't know anyone, if people like that, I mean, knock yourself out. I don't know many. But that, I think, was the pain. It was the grinding. And like I said, I'm on this train and everything comes so fast at me, because here I am as a 45-something woman waking up to reality, waking up to a world that already has this all figured out. And I'm not saying the world has everything figured out, but at least the mistakes I was doing, like patriarchy is good, done. The church did, the world did that. Racism, done. The world figured it out, right? Abuse, we need to be stronger. The world figures this out, makes rules to protect children. And yet we still have bishop worthiness and abuse with children.
And racism.
And racism is still in the system. Exactly. And that waking up, I would say, to the realization that this church is not as good as it claims or portrays, and all those, like, I'm a Mormon. I remember I was at Times Square when they rented all the screens from I'm a Mormon and I'm a Mormon and I'm a biker. I'm a Mormon. I'm a working mom, right? And you just like, wow.
You were at Times Square when that happened? You were at Times Square when that happened?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
That's
I was
amazing.
even at Times Square for Christmas when they had the whole, like, what was it? The star, follow the star. I forgot what that thing was. But all the screens were red with, LDS and follow the star or whatever it was.
What's those? The red, the gift campaign?
Something like this, yeah.
What's
I mean,
hilarious is they spent, I don't know how many millions and millions and millions of dollars
yeah,
on the I Am a Mormon campaign.
yeah.
Now it's a victory for Satan if you use the term Mormon.
Yeah. Did you feel Satan's power when you saw all those I'm a Mormon campaigns?
No, like I said, I was in fairyland. I thought
That's
that was
weird.
the coolest thing ever, right?
I don't understand it.
And then
Yeah,
obviously,
Light the world is the other thing.
oh yes, I think that's what it was. Light the world. You're right. It wasn't the star. Light the world. That's what I saw with a friend that when I was there. And then
Well, you go to Times Square when the church does all kinds of cool things. Let me know
I
when you're
know.
going next.
Yeah, we even went to the New York Temple, and it went once an award because it was Sunday, right? As a good Mormon, you go to church on Sunday, even on your vacation. But
So is it the New York Temple that is like an office building?
yes, and the ward is in the same building.
Yeah.
It's
Oh, it
all
is.
very compact.
So it's
Just
like
get in an elevator and
it's like Morgan Stanley and Holiness to the Lord.
Yes. So it kind of got like where I was angry and mad and frustrated and I felt used. And the whole time I'm talking to my husband, kind of like I told you in the beginning, I was like, did you read this? Do you have an answer for this? My husband, I was like, what? I don't have an answer. So he's kind of like behind me, always like catching up with me while I'm on this train without brakes, right?
So you're on a train without brakes. So what is he? Is he like the ticket taker?
No, he's holding on to dear life.
He's like holding on to the side with his legs,
Yes,
flapping in
exactly.
the wind.
dragging
Be
his
with you,
heels.
but like I said,
He's on his horse trying to catch up to the train.
maybe. But like I said, I think our saving grace was that our marriage was good, right? So he was not willing to sacrifice now our relationship with something that and he could tell I wasn't looking for trouble. I wasn't looking to make the church look good. I mean, the church does that plenty on its own, right? So he could tell that I was hurt. I was deeply confused. I was deeply in pain. So he was really curious. And I was like, okay, tell me where you have this and I will read this. So he was actually the one, like the CES letter, I read it, but to me, it was just like, yep, exactly. That's the problem. So it wasn't particular per se helpful just because I was, I think, too far along. So my husband read who is that, the stake president or somebody who made answers to the CES letter, right? The one guy?
Oh, Jim Bennett?
Yes.
The response, yeah.
Yes. So he read the responses just to still be like, well, I want to at least read this response. I'm like, you go ahead. I will just get more mad because I already was frustrated with Fair Mormon and any apologist. So he read this, and then even he said, wow, it was either aggressive, his tone, to just mock him as a person, or he didn't really have substance.
Yeah, Jim Bennett apologized for how snarky he was.
Yeah. And I appreciate. I think he's a good guy, but
Jim's a good
back
guy.
then,
I shaked his hand once. So
good.
So
Gene knows everybody, by the way.
Yeah.
Gene is the connections whisperer.
Yes. But so my husband read this, and he read Rough Stone Rolling. That was way too much for me. That book, way too thick, way too much. Still excusing, but even my husband said the excuses weren't even good. They almost made it more disgusting than to make excuses when you admit to bad behavior, because that's what he does, Richard.
Right. I'll tell you, Dan Vogel wrote a book, The Making of a Prophet, in 2004 or 3. Rough Stone Rolling came out 1 year later. And they're almost exactly the same book, except for at the end of the chapter, Dan Vogel says, so you can see Joseph Smith's a pious fraud. And Richard Bushman says, so you can see the church is true.
Yeah, then any church is true. Have a book, the church is true. It's like,
no matter what he said, like,
yeah,
these aren't the droids you're looking for.
Exactly. So, but also, as you can imagine, so we have three.
And I had breakfast with Richard and Claudia Bushman once.
Oh, here you go. So we still have 3 kids home. The second one was about to go on a mission. And now my husband and me, I would say, safe to say, we at least were like this church is not true. I mean, the claims are just ridiculous. This is so hard now to hold on. But we still weren't sure with my son on a mission, right? And we were scared. Like, we don't want to scare him away. We don't want him to come home and not being able to trust us, being maybe unsafe with us. So I still had conversations with my son. So I kept this up. Like, so did you came up with a conclusion for race? And he's like, no, Mom. But I mean, I just love those people. I'm like, I think that's awesome. And then my other son he struggled. So my second son never wanted to go on a mission, but he would have done it to please us, right? And because his big brother went. And so we're like, okay, so how do we break this down to him? We don't want him to go. So we're like, sit him down. We're like, so listen, I don't know if you heard Mom and Dad, we sometimes have loud conversations. And he's like, yeah, I mean, yeah, no. And we're like, we're not so sure about the church anymore. And he's like, yeah, I figured that much. We're like, okay, good. And so we're like, do you want to maybe put a pin on the mission? And he's like, okay.
Didn't have to ask him twice, huh?
No, exactly.
I want to please you guys. So
Yeah.
whatever you say.
And it is this awkward conversation. I don't want to make it like nicer, because you're still kind of a red in headlights, right? A deer in headlights. You're still kind of like, how careful do I have to be? I don't want to scare them away. I don't want to put them in a weird, like, I don't know how they're standing with the church. And he had a girlfriend who was still a Mormon. So we're like kind of, this is a sensible topic. And so you still, yeah. And then my other son was at the time 14. Yeah. So he was about to start seminary. And he already told me, like, Mom, I don't want to go to seminary. We're like, well, I'm seminary teacher. You go. If I go, you go. And he was always like, well, I don't want to. And he was a basketball player, or still is. So we already knew. So we're like, so you know what? I think you don't need to go to seminary. And he's like, huh? And we're like, well, we're not so sure about the church anymore. And he's like, good. And we're like, why? And that's when you notice as a parent, and I would say we have a pretty good relationship before and still now with our kids, and yet they're holding back things, right? Because they know exactly what you expect. And so when we slowly opened kind of our gates and saying, at least, we're not so sure anymore about this whole true church thing, they all of a sudden told us stories like where he's like, yeah, kids in my school told me like we were racist for 100 years. And the nanny of the other kid told me, like, asked me if my parents were polygamous. And I was like, no, my dad only has one mom. And so, but he never told us before, right? Because they kind of know this is like awkward. You don't want to put maybe your parents, you don't want to hurt them and whatever. But the one thing that really stood to me was like, so he told us that he had a friend where the dad told his son, don't become friends with him because he's Mormon. And I'm like, why? And the dad said, because they think they're better than everybody else. And I was like, wow, I never heard that.
That's not true. We know we're better than everybody.
We just know it. Exactly. But I was like, oh, how
we bear
sad.
testimony of it every month.
Yes, we just, those like horror of the world, those Catholics, those bitches. But we love them. We love them. And, what can we say? They're just bitches. And so then my daughter, funny enough, so she was baptized during COVID in our pool in our backyard. Our shallow end was here. So our joke was always, we literally just baptized her head because we couldn't do anything else. So she was just like, yeah, we're not going anymore. I mean, that's when you learn your kids were never that deep into it. They're as deep as you make them to reflect to you, right? It wasn't them naturally. She got baptized because it's the right thing to do, because we told her, because the primary told her, not because she thought that's the right thing to do, right?
So you're saying 8-year-olds don't know everything?
Apparently, right? Cannot sign a contract, any contract for that matter, but
yeah, like I would like to tell somebody, hey, I just signed up your 8-year-old to whole life insurance. They owe me $1,000 a month for the rest of their life. How about that?
Exactly,
you think
right?
That'll stand up in court?
Yeah. I wonder. So that was still, though it was on shaky grounds, a beautiful experience where in that moment, I just knew we would be okay. We will survive this. Doesn't matter what the outcome is.
Confirmation by the Spirit.
Yes. So then I talked with a really dear friend, and she listened to me a ton. And she was at some point, Jessie, you need a ride to the church. I'm like, I'm not the first who come up with this stuff. I'm just reading what people already figured out decades ago. She's like, well, you need to talk to the stake president. And I was still seminary teacher. So just kind of, that's how confusing it is as a Mormon, right? Even though I was already at the point where I knew this can't be true, I still was trying to play with the system and still go along. And my son was on a mission, but I'm telling my other kids, like, forget about it, right? And so I'm like, okay, I go to the stake president just to say, I did it all. So I had a conversation with my stake president. The hangout was, I think, I had in seminary talking about if the flood, Noah's flood, was a global flood or a local flood, and what's the stand from the church. And I said, no, the real hangout was the Wilcox talk, that really disgusting, disturbingly racist Wilcox talk was my hanger, where I was like, I'm really frustrated right now with the church, and the church did not come out, right? And straightly said, that's bad. That was a bad talk. Like, this is not right.
The real question is, why did whites have to wait 1,800 years
to
get the priesthood?
If people are not
why
aware,
did blacks have to wait until 1978?
Yes, right. And when women, what do you want? Just shut up. We serve you. Great. Like that's
give a man a hug. You're holding the priesthood. Why worry about it?
Exactly. And others just playing church, right? So we're the real deal.
That's right.
But we're not judging. So that was the hangout. I went to the stake president and we talked back and forth. And I'm like, well, I'm struggling with polygamy. And he's like, well, what is it? So I was just like, well, Brigham Young. I was told he has 5 wives. And I was like, Brigham Young's polygamy. And he's like, don't worry about it. I mean, how many wives did he had? 5? And at this point, I knew the conversation is over because I already knew more than he, right?
He
If
only
you want to tell
there
me,
were 5 wives
yes,
Brigham Young
that's
had?
what he said.
Wow.
And he's now a mission president in Africa, of all places, right?
Would that be bad to say his name?
Huh?
Would that
Yeah,
be bad
Newberger.
to say his name?
Greg Newberger he's a good guy, but
Yeah.
he didn't know what he was talking about. He was just like, how many wives did he had? I mean, 5. I mean, we're just glad we don't have to live. And I was just like,
Right, this past news. It's old news.
Yes. If you don't have your facts together, if you would have at least said 40 plus, I would have been okay, right? I would have been like, okay, whatever. But 5, that's not even close in the realm, right? So that's when I kept the conversation then, and then he recommended like LDS Approved or whatever podcast, and I was just like, my husband was writing it down to be polite. But it's interesting how like just a half year earlier, I would have been like, oh, great, and you just take everything like so literally from your leaders. And all of a sudden you sit here and I'm like, I already know more than you. And that's not coming from an arrogant place, right? I wasn't thinking like, oh, I know more than you. It was just like, it's just wrong. You don't know what you're talking about. And then you cannot be trustworthy to me, right? And I cannot trust what you're saying when you don't even know what you're talking about.
Yeah. I almost want to have him find out that it's over 50.
Yeah.
And then have you say, well, what do you think about that? And have him say, well, I meant 5 good ones.
Yeah. Or 5 small ones, or maybe
only get
5 big
5
ones.
good
Who
wives out
knows?
of 50.
All you have to do to advance in the church is know how to say yes and know how to fling the bullshit against any non-Mormon who brings up valid points.
And that's to your point. Yeah.
Yeah. And let's excommunicate anyone who asks questions.
Yeah, then they should,
Brilliant.
right? In a matter.
Yeah.
And that's the frustrating, I think, point is when you notice, because I thought Mormonism is in a way built on facts, right? The first vision happened this way. Joseph Smith translated the book this way. So that's how I build my knowledge and whatever testimony means, right? Because it's just feelings at the end of the day. But still, I still thought Mormonism was logical because there were some facts, right? But if those facts are so skewed, and now He'd never really had the Urim and Thummim glasses, how we pretended like, real glasses. Now he just had his head his literally head in a head, right? And a rock, and the scriptures were always like in some bundle. It's just like where you're like, who are you kidding here? Nobody will believe you that story. And that's exactly why you hit it, because the story is ridiculous. It's unbelievable. And the best proof is that ridiculous video clip that Nelson did himself. You can see how he has such a hard time looking in the head, right?
So you're saying this is not going to work?
Apparently.
Well, and Joseph Smith didn't write down his experiences the way that the church teaches. He had 8 different versions of it, and then the church came up with their own version. Because talk about ridiculous. How ridiculous is it that God the Father and Jesus Christ came down to tell him, don't join any of the churches?
And to that point also, I was like, so if none of the prophets in the Old Testament or the New Testament were literally capable of seeing God the Father, only one, right? You would be smothered or burned or whatever the Bible comes up with. And then there's only one person in human existence who's both of them. It's almost like a kid who needs to top everybody, right? And so that's how he became to me. He's just a guy who he's almost like, I don't know, maybe has no
Jesse,
good. Yeah.
I've seen all 3 of them.
It's just a race of, yeah. It was, and then all of a sudden Satan comes too, right? Satan is not even in the first vision either, in the first version.
And I'm partnering with Satan right now. So there you go.
Here you go, right? So it's really this like topping the story, right? Where you're like, oh, I'm losing my audience. Actually, it wasn't just God. It was Jesus Christ too. That's still a boring story. You know what? And Satan. Satan came, man. He put me to the ground. Let me tell you. Oh, I got them back. They're listening, right? I mean,
you're saying like Joseph Smith was like that guy that was on Saturday Night Live as a kid. He's like, oh yeah, I did that.
Yeah, that's the ticket. I've seen Morgan Fairchild naked. Yeah.
So, again, use logic. I'm sorry. If you want to believe somebody who can translate in a head in a language that doesn't even exist, knock yourself out. I cannot follow you, right?
So you believe in science and logic now?
Yeah.
And you believe in rational thinking?
Yes. I mean, and that's just where it became that pattern where all of a sudden rational thinking took over me. And even the thing I believed, right? Joseph Smith got driven out of the towns because he was such a good guy. And even that, I have to admit, even as a believing woman, I was always like, why do so many people hate you because you're such a good guy? Why? I mean, maybe there are some like 2 or 3 jealous people, but really the whole town hated a good guy because he was so good. I mean, this is a story a 5-year-old might believe you, but you grow up and you kind of like, it's an iffy story. And then you learn about polygamy and teenage girls. And even as a believing or sort of a believing woman, I was like, I kind of get why the people didn't want him in his town, right? I mean,
so you know what, Jesse? It sounds like we could do a show with you. We can call it 10 hours of Jessie Frankel telling about the things that are wrong with the church.
Yeah. It's a never-ending story.
Go ahead.
And I was going to say, we turn into pumpkins here in just a few minutes. So is this the point that you say, that's it? At what point did you resign from your teaching responsibility?
So my husband and me came to a point where we said, this is not true, right? But my son was still on a mission, and I got through some friend contact with John DeLynn. So I was like, can you just real quick help me? What do I do with my son? And he's like, don't tell anyone, because then they would put their hooks in him and say, you need to save your family and how bad they are. Don't do it. So we really kept it undercover. So I taught half a year of seminary where I never mentioned Joseph Smith or the Book of Mormon. I just kept it with Jesus Christ, being good people, supporting our LGBT. And when somebody was saying something against us, I'm like, I'd rather err on the good side the rest will happen. I will love those people. So I try to bring nuance in my seminary class. I love those kids. I did it for them, not for the church. So I finished the summer. That was also the summer where my son came home, and I only told the stake. I was like, my husband literally changed his job, so I was like, he will traveling more, and I still have a kid in elementary school. I need to put down my seminary calling. So they didn't know I was putting it down because I questioned things, just to keep still the surface complete for my son. My son came home from mission. That was kind of another story I could tell another time. The mission president really, really pushed us to the limit, where my husband always like, I fly out, I get him, you know that. Was throwing the priesthood, I have the higher priesthood, and your son is under my blah, blah, blah. I'm like, what? No, that's not how it goes. And so my son slowly was kind of like, I have a lot of questions and I'm struggling. And then they told him they need to teach the Book of Mormon. He's like, it doesn't work with people, Spanish-speaking people. So he struggled then at the end. And so I was like, do you want to come home? I was just like, I will ask him. We get you. We will make it happen either way. And he's like, yeah, it would be fun to be home for Father's Day. And so that would have been 2 months before his mission end. And I'm like, okay, we get you home. And then all hell broke loose. But he came home a month earlier. Nobody talked about it. Our bishop even said he came home with honor, because nobody, by 23 months, nobody's counting in the ward. Everybody just thought he came home with everybody else. He gave his talk. We were all out, not believing. He gave his talk, only talked about Jesus Christ and loving others. And it's funny how so many members came, how it was the best talk. It was such a good talk. I'm like, how could you not tell me not believing? But, I guess the gift of discernment doesn't exist, does it? That was the last time we as a family put foot in a Mormon church, his talk. And then we were done. And then the more I learned, I became so upset that I didn't want to be even connected to it. So to me, it was more a health ritual to say, I want to resign, really, officially. I just don't want to be inactive, because to me, I never was inactive. I was actively against it. So to me, that's just a pitiful title we give members who leave, because it's just like, oh, they're not strong enough. They're not good enough. So I was like, no. I go out on my terms. I don't want to be excommunicated because of my content. I was worried because our bishop was looking at it, and his wife too.
You started posting some things like science and history and current events.
No, it was mostly church history. So where I'm like, you tell me why that prophet said that, right? I was just quoting. I was like, right. You tell me what you think, how this feels good.
You're just posting, this is what happened.
Yes.
But people think you're anti because that's a bad quote. It's like, well, I didn't say it. They said it.
Exactly. So that's
when did you resign?
What? And then October 2020.
2021.
2022, yeah, sorry. 2022.
2022.
Yeah, so a couple of months later, so my son came back from his mission. He tried a little bit the single ward. He said it's even worse. They have no clue what they're talking about. This is bad. And he was too. He was still like, I would say, Christian. The Christian part still spoke to him. And so we waited a little bit, and then I was like, I told my husband, I need to resign. It was really like I wanted to post freely, because I had Mormons then kind of attack me, right? And I'm like, you tell me what's wrong about this. This is not me saying it. I quote it. So tell me what's wrong about the quote. But why do you have to make the church look bad? I'm like, how am I making it bad? They said it. But I was a little bit concerned, though, that it would come back. I did not want to be excommunicated. I didn't want to go to this ridiculous court of love, whatever they call it right now. So I was like, I want to go out on my terms, and I want definitely nothing to do with this organization. So I was like, I need to. And my husband's like, I'm on board. So we asked, and our children, do you guys want us to do this for you? And my son, the returned missionary, said, then do it for me too. And I'm like, okay. So all 6 of us signed out. Peace out.
Amen to that. Yeah, peace out. We're getting tons of calls and messages from our viewers wanting to know what your shirt says, what shirt that is.
It doesn't say anything, but it's death to coffee.
Oh, gotcha. I love that. I'm just kidding because this isn't live, so we're not getting messages, but I've been curious.
That's
We
what I
will
like
get-
about Dan
We would
McClellan,
have got
right?
tons of calls.
Yeah.
Yes.
He always has
love
a
it.
T-shirt. I like that too.
I'm wearing
Friend, help.
Friends Help You Move. Wait, yeah, Friends Help You Move. Real friends help you move bodies.
Yep, steal horses.
That's
I
right.
wore that when I was, in the funeral business.
But not when you work for the mob.
No, but my fiance Amanda, for my birthday yesterday, gave me a podcast shirt that I think I showed yesterday, and then the other one says Podfather, and it's black, like a Godfather.
We'll see that shirt soon. All right.
You'll see it soon.
So should we include Jesse's link to Facebook, and then people can friend you, because otherwise you don't have it open to everybody, only your friends.
I'm
can
also
see
on
it.
Instagram.
Oh yeah, send me the Instagram link.
Yes.
And
So I think Facebook, you're under Jessica Frankel, correct?
Yes, that's just my regular name, everything. I think I'll send it to you, but I think Instagram is Jessie Hello or something. So it's a little less personal.
So
Well,
check the
we can't, Alexa, stop. We can't thank you enough for sharing all of this with us. It's opened my eyes to how you've arrived at where you are. And Jean, do you have anything else that you want to ask Jessie?
Nope, just lets us know why you're such a good content creator, and
Thank you.
pages and pages and pages.
Keep up the good work. And
yeah, I mean, I have to say that's the only thing I'm kind of proud of. It's not so much the content, but getting that knowledge and not stopping. I helped two friends. One was a Relief Society president. No, State Relief Society presidency while she deconstructed with me. And another friend, that's the only girl that was in my ward, remember when I told you? So she deconstructed with me as well. And my dad deconstructed with me. So
well, it might be a good T-shirt. Is the glory of Exmo is intelligence.
Yeah.
You've got a lot more than
amen to that.
You've got a lot more than two things to be proud of. You've helped more people than you can imagine. So
that's make me happy. That just makes me happy. That's all I want. People to hear the truth, think about it, and then they make their. I'm not asking anything to do. You don't need to go tomorrow. You don't need to quit, whatever. But just intellectually think about it, read it, think about it, and then where does your heart really go with this? Like, what's your brain?
God blessed you with a brain. How about using it?
Yeah,
that's a great parting thought. So thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you. It was a fun time.
And stay tuned for the next show. We never know who will pop up.
That's
Obviously.
right.
It's so fun.
Like,
it's a colorful world.
Right? Yeah.
I'm always happy to come back if you have something. I have time.
Thanks. Thanks. Jean, you can take us out.
That's right. Share, like, and subscribe. Have a happy rest of 2025, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.